people pass pretty high level of fitness to remain in the police force, very much like the military. But again, I'm coming from the military, from that mindset. But I think it's a good mindset, because when the standards are raised for everyone, people generally adapt to the higher standards. We have to understand, physically speaking, women cannot handle the rigors physically that men can handle. They're just not built that way. It's nothing bad against women, but they cannot do as many push-ups. They cannot do as many pull-ups. And I'm talking, again, averages. Yes, if you get an obese man against a very fit woman, the women can probably do more. We want the fittest, dedicated officers. If you cannot be in physical shape, shame on you if you're a law enforcement officer and you're out of shape. It looks bad for the profession. It looks bad in these videos, and it just shows what type of employees people are. If I'm a law enforcement officer, I'm going to be the best law enforcement officer I can possibly be. But we have to understand, if we raise these standards so that police need to continually pass, maybe once a year, these physical fitness standards, including body fat, then that's going to be pretty tough, especially if they're all one standard. Because right now, they're not equal. Women, generally speaking, I can't speak for all departments or all agencies, but generally speaking, women have different physical standards than men. What I will explain to you is, it's not that the officer is genuinely excited, although he may be a little excited, but not that ridiculously excited. He's doing that for the benefit of the dog. And so we always want to have, as a canine handler, the dog in a high state of readiness and knowing in the dog's mind that he's going to get rewarded and that he did a good job. It's just like when you train your pet dog. If you train your pet dog to sit and then you give it a bunch of good boy with a high-pitched voice, they're going to get the message that they're doing the right thing. And so the same thing is happening here. But with these working dogs, it needs to be taken to a higher level. And as I said, the body camera does not capture everything. Things could be happening behind the officer that you cannot see. There could be additional information that is completely being left out. The public in general, in my perception, when someone watches a YouTube video of a body camera, they believe that they're getting the whole story, and they can judge it based on that little clip, the whole clip, even if it's 20 minutes. Can they shoot that individual in the back running away? Well, it depends on the circumstances, because everything is situationally dependent. Every case is different. If he was running back towards that firearm to pick it up, then I will say yes, that would be justification to shoot the individual who's going towards a firearm, probably to pick it up and turn around and shoot the police. You do not have to wait until someone actually has a firearm in their hand and is pointing it at the police. And then there's other circumstances, but as I said, every case is different. Every circumstance is different. Would you normally be able to shoot someone in the back? No, not normally, except in some rare circumstances. It is possible. And the public generally doesn't know that. So you see how body camera footage could get out there that can either be manipulated or prejudged and prejudged negatively, and the police take the brunt of it, even though they did everything right. And in many cases, just for entertainment, they want to hate on the police, and they're looking for anything to justify their own position. And as I said, the body camera does not capture everything. Things could be happening behind the officer that you cannot see. There could be additional information that is completely being left out. The public in general, in my perception, when someone watches a YouTube video of a body camera, they believe that they're getting the whole story, and they can judge it based on that little clip, the whole clip, even if it's 20 minutes. Negative about body cameras is that is a very static view of the body camera. It's not capturing everything that's happening on the scene. Not only is it not capturing what happened before the camera got turned on, but it's also not captured what happened after the camera was turned off. And it's a static view. No, the police should not be wearing body cameras. I'm going to explain myself now, and I'm going to explain myself by giving you the positives and negatives, and we'll see if the positives outweigh the negatives or vice versa, and how I came to my conclusion. And feel free to comment below. What do you think? Do you think that the police should be wearing body cameras? Here's some of the positives of body cameras. That's going to be seen very poorly by the public, and there will be public outrage. And can you shoot someone in the back if they're unarmed? Most of the public would say, no, you cannot. And most of the time that's the case, but there are circumstances where, yes, you can shoot someone in the back if you're a law enforcement officer and they're unarmed. So in that circumstance, that person is a known criminal who just committed a violent act and is fleeing. Even if some limited facts are released, a very short narrative, for example, in a YouTube video down in the description box, that doesn't tell the whole story. And how many viewers actually look in the description box of a video and read? I'm going to say the vast majority of people just want to watch videos, and in many cases, just for entertainment, they want to hate on the police, and they're looking for anything to justify their own position. And that's very dangerous for the public perception of the police, even though the police are doing the right thing. The public doesn't know about Graham versus Connor, the landmark case that governs use of force. 1% of the public knows that. They're not judging this based on case law. They're judging this based on just what they're seeing in a video out of context and not knowing all the facts. But there are circumstances where, yes, you can shoot someone in the back if you're a law enforcement officer and they're unarmed. So in that circumstance, that person is a known criminal who just committed a violent act and is fleeing. He's a fleeing felon who just committed a violent act. He just shot somebody in the head. Can the police shoot him in the back even though he has dropped the firearm? I will say yes. There's a lot of allegations. You hear that all the time. I've never seen it in my career. I don't know how it could happen. First of all, where would they get these drugs in the first place, these officers? Drugs aren't just floating around in the department. Yeah, it's possible, but officers would say something about that, and it would get squashed pretty quickly, unless it's a very small department, I believe. And evidence is highly controlled. Yes, the police are corrupt. Now let me explain myself. Let's back out here a little bit. Let's zoom out and let's see the bigger picture. We have to understand that police are human. Police are human beings, and human beings, we are corrupt. Now, there's levels here that we have to consider. Human beings are corrupt because of survival instinct. Human beings are corrupt because of survival instinct. What I mean is, humans, by their nature, generally speaking, will take advantage of situations for their benefit. This is conscious and unconscious. For example, if someone is offered something that will benefit them in their lives, people will generally take that opportunity if they think that they can get away with it. The incident needs to be investigated so they can compile all the facts of what happens first, in my opinion, before they can release body camera footage. But they're releasing it because the public is demanding it. And if you don't have all the facts, if it hasn't been investigated, and you just release body camera footage, how do you think the public is going to judge that? It could be completely justified in every way. Police can be corrupt to a very low level, or police can be corrupt to a very high level, and there's everything in between, and the vast majority are somewhere in between. But they're much less corrupt than the average person in society, because the average person in society doesn't have the standards and the policies and the laws that they have to follow like the police do. Yes, they have to follow laws, or there's consequences. Another reason why the average police officer is much less corrupt than the average citizen is. In my case, for example, I was in Police Explorers and I knew exactly what I wanted to do when I was a teenager, even as a kid. And I came from a law enforcement family. So I kept myself clean. I did not break the law knowing that I wanted a career in law enforcement, and I had to hold myself to a high standard in order to get into law enforcement. So there's the extreme of myself with very high standards, and high standards of myself and others in my profession. And then there's the opposite extreme where there's just straight out criminal activity happening on the behalf of the police. Both extremes are rare. Everyone else probably lands somewhere in between. So I was thinking when I was planning this talk here and my answer, I was thinking about some of the things that I did that was corrupt in my career. One thing that is complicated when you're pulling over another state vehicle, for example, or a city vehicle that is an official vehicle, in some states and some jurisdictions, you cannot actually run that license plate through normal channels. So in other words, if you stop a government type vehicle and you attempt to run the plates through your dispatch like any other vehicle, it will come back as no record on file because it's a government plate. So just from what I'm hearing right now, that's the complication he's having. It appears that he's attempting to relay the plate information of this vehicle, but it's complicated because now that he sees it, he's probably thinking it's not going to come back as record. YouTube is not a good place to gauge that because we have to understand there are thousands of jurisdictions out in the United States, be it federal, state, and local jurisdictions, and there's thousands of officers working in those same jurisdictions. And how many interactions does one officer have with the public in one day? So for me, for example, I could have hundreds of interactions with the public, just me by myself in one day of work. First of all, the suspect, I don't know if you heard, he said, "I have a knife in my pocket," which that's pretty rare for a suspect to volunteer that information. Usually they will not say a word. But second of all, we have the officer pointing that taser directly at the suspect's back. And why is that? That's the meatiest part of the back. That is a center point of the back. And when a taser is used, in order for it to be effective, it needs to be pointed at a major muscle group. Because if it's not pointed at a major muscle group, more than likely it will not be effective. It will not get neuromuscular incapacitation. That's what it's called. Off of canine, stop or you're going to get bit. Now, I was a canine officer in my career. There's two types of dogs that are out there being deployed by law enforcement in general, which are called passive and aggressive. Just based on what he said about the dog biting, that's an aggressive dog. So I had a passive dog. And the difference is with a passive dog, these passive dogs are mainly used to detect drugs and to find people. However, they are not trained to bite, and they are highly discouraged from biting, even though biting could happen possibly if the dog gets scared. In this case, this dog will bite if told to by police. He will attack a suspect with the intent to stop the suspect. And so this is a use of force, whereas a passive dog is not a use of force. I don't know what the policies are in all departments. There could be a policy in this department or this agency where it's required that the officers tell someone when they're under arrest. However, case law, you do not have to tell a suspect that they're under arrest. You do not have to say you are under arrest. You can simply arrest someone, put them in handcuffs, put them in a vehicle, transport them to jail, and then say a word under case law. Now, again, saw are what are called, there's different names for them in different jurisdictions, but I know them as spike strips. And he threw out a spike strip, which has spikes on it, into the middle of the road with the hope that the suspect will run over those spikes and it will puncture the tires. And then what he will do, once that suspect passes that area, he will retrieve the spike strips and then go back into normal duty or move ahead in the case that they did not puncture the tires. And many times there'll be multiple officers out in the area they think he's going to pass to throw out spike strips. That way there's more of a chance that he will run over. If he was able to bypass one officer's spike strips and go around them and the tires were not punctured, then in the future, the officer has another chance to puncture the tires. And the point of puncturing the tires is to stop the vehicle. It's getting tougher and tougher to be in law enforcement these days. If I was a new recruit, I probably wouldn't want to be in law enforcement these days. There's too much public scrutiny, even if things are done correctly. People are going to jail, in my opinion, and losing their jobs for doing things that were completely justified, in my opinion.
Oh. Okay.
As you saw, that dog had a flip-flop. I believe it was a flip-flop in his mouth. What is that? That is a scent item. And so what will happen is if an officer has a clothing item that belonged to the suspect, he will give that to the dog, and then that dog will know what the scent of the person is that they're looking for. That will clue them into that scent. Then they can follow that scent. It's called a funnel. They will follow that scent, which is a funnel, into the woods, as you can see, and they will track that suspect. They will have a better chance of tracking that suspect and honing in on their smell.
Okay, well, I appreciate you telling me, son.
Yes, sir.
I don't know if you just noticed what that officer did with those handcuffs. What he did, after he had the handcuffs on, there's a double lock. That's what it's called, a double lock. There's a push button area on those handcuffs where a handcuff key, the top of a handcuff key, is used to completely lock the handcuffs. And that just makes it more secure so the suspect cannot escape out of the handcuffs. Because if you do not double lock the handcuffs, they're easily, not, I wouldn't say easily, but they are easier to escape from. Also, the suspect cannot see what the officers are doing if he's turned the opposite way. And now they asked him to get on his knees. That's just another position of disadvantage, because if someone's on their knees, then they're less likely to be a threat and less likely to escape.
Put your hands on top of your head. Cross your feet, man. Sit on them.
Put your hands on top of your head, cross your feet. This is very standard procedure in most agencies and departments. The officer has taken up a position here, and I've mentioned this before in other videos, between the door and the main part of the vehicle. And that is because of cover and concealment. If he was to be shot at by a suspect, that's probably one of the most safest places to be, in that if he was being shot at, more than likely the engine would absorb the fire downrange coming towards him. And then it's just harder for a suspect to aim and hit the officer.
Announce yourself or you're going to get dog bit! Sheriff's K-9, come out! You will be bit! Bring your ass out here now!
Get your hands up.
Come here, come here. Here.
Get your hands up. Walk out to me. Do it now. The dog's about to come back in. Let me hear you.
Up, Tommy.
Just in case you're not aware, they're having the suspect come out of the bushes out of the brush, out of the vegetation, so they don't have to go in, because if an officer has to go into vegetation, they're putting themselves at risk. It just makes things more complicated and it's more dangerous. So rather than that, they have a suspect come out of an area instead of having officers go into an area.
Let me hear you.
And so if you're a member of the public, just realize that an officer may tell you to do something and you might not understand why that is, but there's always a reason and a method to what he's doing. And so this is to minimize his attention, because if something goes wrong, he is distracted and bad things can happen.
Sick. Live.
The officer said, "Turn around and face away from me. Get on your knees." What's happening is the officer is putting that suspect in a state of disadvantage, a position of disadvantage. Whereas the suspect, if he has his back turned, the officer, number one, can see the suspect's hands, and also if he needs to fire a shot of a taser, for example, or a firearm, he has a clear shot.
On your right side. He's somewhere in this woodlot. You giving canine warnings?
Yes, I am. I can't confirm he's armed or not.
All right, we're going to give canine warnings, and then we're going to move to the backyard. Everybody hold.
One officer asked the other officer, "Are you getting canine warnings?" What's a canine warning? A canine warning is basically a dog, a canine, is giving hints that there could be someone in that area. And so the dog is giving, many dogs, for example, when I was a canine officer, would give certain behaviors that the officer could recognize to be able to know if the dog is on a scent or not, a scent of the suspect.
Hold what you got.
You see how this officer is set up? He opened the door to a vehicle. And so what he's doing, he's creating a barrier in case there is a firefight here. And this is a good place to be for law enforcement, because it gives them a barrier, probably the best barrier, where they can actually look out and see the vehicle, but they're covered. So if shots start ringing out and shots start coming down range to their area, that's between the engine, which would probably, in many cases, absorb most type of ammunition that would be fired at police.
Driver, roll the window down. Do it now.
Normally, what would happen on a high-risk vehicle stop like this is the officer will be using the intercom system instead of yelling. But sometimes I've done it before also, where I forgot to get on the microphone, the intercom, and just started yelling out commands, because adrenaline is running high right now. And so tunnel vision is happening right now to this officer. And when that is the case, when someone is not free to leave and an officer is asking them questions, they need to be read their rights, their Miranda rights, before questions are being asked. If you're asking with very limited circumstances, for example, I've mentioned in prior videos that an officer may ask for identifying information, for example, but if they're asking questions that may implicate someone in a crime and they feel like they have to answer, then they need to be read their Miranda rights. One thing that the general public also doesn't know, even if someone has been advised of their rights, their Miranda rights, and they start answering questions, they can stop answering questions at any time during that interaction. They can stop and say, "I'm not going to answer any further questions." He drove around the stop sticks. If they know that there's going to be a pursuit, the police will normally send a vehicle up ahead if they know the route that the operator is likely to take, or they'll send out several different units in different directions where they believe that that vehicle that is evading is going to pass by. And then they will throw out these spikes, and they're retractable. They'll throw out the spikes hoping that the operator will not see them, and they'll drive over the top of them, and that will puncture the tire. But it looks like in this video that the operator has been able to observe them and drive around them.
We're driving 32 miles. I'm sorry, this is 1 Charlie 34. Looks like he just got hit by a stick.
What he's saying is he believes that the operator just ran over those spikes that were thrown out. And as you saw on the right-hand side, there was another police vehicle. That was probably another officer throwing out the spike sticks, and the operator ran over them. My opinion is law enforcement officers should have physical standards. This is glaring to me right here in this video right now. Officers should have physical standards for employment, not only to enter employment, but ongoing throughout their career. And what do I mean by that? Most departments, at least to get into the department or to get into the agency, they have to pass physical standards. And in many cases, that is a variety of different exercises they have to perform, like push-ups, a certain number of push-ups at a minimum, a certain amount of sit-ups, a run, and one of those things is a body fat percentage. So this has been challenged in court. I don't know to what extent. I don't know if it's nationwide, but in many cases, this has been challenged by officers themselves, and they say that this is an issue that I have with body cameras, because the general public only sees what's in this video from a very limited static view. They do not see what's happening from other angles. For example, we cannot see if this person is in handcuffs or not. We also did not see what happened before the video started, and we cannot see what happens after the video ends, yet this is released to the public. And so the public can scrutinize many things. And I'm going to go ahead and scrutinize just from what I'm seeing, just like I said in my intro, of what you as a person of the general public might also scrutinize. But I'm giving a more in-depth, detailed look at from behind the scenes of my experience in law enforcement. So if they have him in a certain position, he's going to be less able to resist the arrest. And the officers can overpower him if, for example, there is an attempt to resist the officers.
Face away from it, put the phone on the carts.
If someone has their hands in their pocket, and this is not something specific to this incident, this is pretty much all the time. People that officers encounter, we do not want them to have their hands in their pockets. That is because if you don't see where their hands are, their hands could be doing something else. And that, for example, if they have something in their pocket like a weapon, they could pull that weapon out and use that against the officer. And then also they could have contraband in the pockets also. Let's continue on. So there's no question about the command that he's giving this individual. So good job on this officer giving a short, clear, concise command: stop.
Stop. Stop. Stop. Step out of the car for us. Stop. Both of you. Stop. Step out of the car for him, man. All right? No guns on you, nothing like that, man? All right, step out for him, bud.
You hear what he asked him? He said, no guns on you or anything? And the individual shook his head no.
We'll explain what's going on here in a minute, sir, okay? Step out of the car. Step out of the car. Okay, you don't have a gun or anything on you, right, man? All right, step away.
Now he said, you don't have a gun on you or anything, right? Or something to that effect. But also, it depends on most departments that I've seen and agencies I've seen these days. There's no ongoing testing once you're hired. It's basically once you're hired, you're on, you pass the test, and you're good for the next 30 years. There are exceptions, but it's a shame to me. It's a doggone shame. And I'll probably do a separate video about this. But why am I referencing all this background information in reference to why I believe that most women, 99% roughly, should not be in law enforcement? We have to understand, physically speaking, women cannot handle the rigors physically that men can handle.
Hands out of your pockets. Hands out of your pockets. Keep your hands up in the air. Put your hands up in the air. Turn around. Face away from me. Face away from me. Face away from me. Put the phone on the carts. Put the phone on the carts.
Hello, this is Jason Matthews. I'm a recently retired law enforcement officer. I was also a use of force instructor and a taser instructor during my career. And in this video, I'm going to be commenting on this public domain video that was released out of Florida. And I'll be giving you my perspective based on my training and experience of what I might be thinking if I was in this officer's shoes, what actions I might consider, and also giving you some information that the general public doesn't know about law enforcement. I don't know the details of this incident, and this is all hypothetical. Being a body camera is a limited static view of the incident. I'm just reacting to what I'm seeing while I'm watching in real time, just like you. But before we get started, if you support the police, click the like button. And if you do not support the police, click the dislike button. It's anonymous. I'm just curious of where you stand. Okay, let's get started. So what we've seen so far, there's an arrest occurring right now. And several things have happened in this video already in just the first few seconds that I want to break down and comment on. So we're going to go back to the beginning of the video, and I'm going to break it down step by step about what they're doing and what they're saying and why they're doing it, in my belief.
And let's see your hands out of your pockets. Hands out of your pockets.
Did you hear what he just said? He said, hands out of pocket. Why? First of all, officer safety. If someone has their hands in their pocket, and this is not something specific to this incident, this is pretty much all the time. We do not, people that officers encounter, we do not want them to have their hands in their pockets. That is because if you don't see where their hands are, their hands could be doing something else. And that, for example, if they have something in their pocket like a weapon, they could pull that weapon out and use that against the officer. And then also they could have contraband in the pockets also. Let's continue on.
Keep your hands up in the air. Put your hands up in the air. Turn around.
He just said two things right there. He said, hands up in the air and turn around. Why hands up in the air? He's putting him in a disadvantage for officer safety. If someone has their hands in the air, they are less likely to be able to get to a weapon, for example, or do further harm if that's what their intent is. Another reason is, again, if they have their hands in the air and they're fully up in the air, the officer can see those hands fully, versus if they're down at their sides. If they're up in the air, the officer has a clear view of the hands of the individual.
Around. Face away from me. Face away from me.
He just said, face away from me. Why? He's putting him at a further disadvantage. Why? When I say disadvantage, what do I mean? He's putting him in a position where the officers have the advantage to make the arrest. So if they have him in a certain position, he's going to be less able to resist the arrest. And the officers can overpower him if, for example, there is an attempt to resist the officers.
Face away from me. Put the phone on the carts. Put the phone on the carts.
I believe he said, put the phone on the cart. And why would he say that? Two things. A phone could be possibly used as a weapon. If someone has a phone in their hand, they could turn around, swing, and hit somebody in the head. That's a possibility. Number two, if they're making the arrest, they don't want to have something in their hands to prevent the arrest. That's just another obstacle they don't want to deal with. And having him put his hands on the cart, now, that's even a further disadvantage. They're putting him a further disadvantage because now he's bent over. The carts are lower, so he has to bend over to make contact with the carts.
Come on. What's your name, bro?
Now he is asking him what his name is. Why? Whenever an officer is going to arrest someone, or is arresting someone, or has arrested someone, or has to detain someone, really it's a detention at this second until they know who this individual is. Then it's converted into an arrest. Once they identify the person, they know this is the correct person that they're arresting. So they're asking him his name to make sure this is the correct individual. We always want to make sure this is the correct individual because we don't want to take innocent people into custody, correct?
What's your name? What is your name?
Shakira.
Yeah. Just what's your name, man?
So as you can see, there are multiple officers around. Why is that? Whenever there's an arrest, especially the title of this video is a homicide arrest, especially in a circumstance where someone is suspected of homicide or the arrest is being taken place for homicide or there's probable cause to believe, then we want to have as many officers as possible. Why is that? If someone is suspected of committing homicide, then that individual is assumed to have committed a violent act, and we have to assume for officer safety reasons that that officer could continue to or could make another violent act against the officer. So just as a safety precaution, officer safety, multiple officers are involved here.
What is your name?
We have
What's your
it
last
all
name?
secure for now. What's the problem? I'm not doing that.
Okay.
I was on my phone.
Well, then we'll figure that out here in a minute. You could really help us out if you could identify yourself.
See, so now they have him restrained in handcuffs, and they're going to identify him, if at all possible, before they take him from that scene. And so generally, I don't know if this is an arrest warrant or someone was identified him from the street, for example. Maybe an officer drove by and identified him, what he thought was this individual who was wanted, for example. I don't know if that's the case here, but I'm just making up possible scenarios. And so if there is an arrest warrant, for example, there's going to be a picture in most cases of the individual that they will have with them with the arrest warrant to make sure that that is the correct individual based off the photograph. And then also, they're going to do a search. So if he doesn't provide his name, or if this individual does not provide the identity, then they will, since this is an arrest, they will be able to, as an incident to arrest, search the individual. And during that search, they will try to obtain an identification of the individual and then try to identify him in that manner.
What is the problem?
Okay. You're also not going to work with us on that. Hold on.
I'm not. What was I doing? I was on the phone. Was I not?
Call for
I got it right here.
Somebody have a picture of him?
I got it right here.
Yeah.
Sure. Don't put that close.
Yeah.
Huh?
That's what we have.
Yeah, we think so.
So as you see there, they're having multiple officers have a photograph, and they're going to compare that to make sure this is the correct individual that they're taking into custody.
You don't have anything on you with your name on it?
I got rapid ID.
All right,
Cool.
What's the issue with this?
We'll figure all that out here in just a couple minutes.
Okay, question for you down in the comments. Respond, why is this officer putting on gloves? The officer that's standing next to the individual who has been detained or arrested in this case. Why is he putting gloves on? Comment down below. I want to know your answer. And if you enjoyed this video, click the subscribe button and ring the notification bell to be notified when new videos are released. Take care.